Hello and welcome students to my channel. Yesterday I have shared one video with respect to macro, and macros are very powerful with respect to advanced C concept. Why we are using macros? Because in programming language we are able to define the reusable code snippet. So every time we are using macros as a commands to the preprocessor. So what basic understanding we need to have with respect to the macros? Macros you can define basically with respect to the name of macro is given, and the macro definition you can actually use before compilation process. So your code gets compiled later, but pre-processing happens before. So if I want to use macros without argument or macros with argument, it is how we are going to implement it that we are going to see. Now if I am having a macro with respect to a calculative part that I can do, suppose I have two parameters or two arguments that I am going to pass. So macros with arguments are very much dynamic, and they are going to replace the code criterias with respect to passing values. So you can actually assign some values to the variable also, then you can put some variable inside the argument. So that depends on how you are going to have the parameters to be used and how they are going to get declared with respect to macros. So let us see one small demonstration where we are able to do some calculative stuff with respect to argument. Now, suppose even if you want to perform the macro that you want to just replace the constant, and according to that you can replace any particular code snippet as per your requirement. So macros are very much flexible, but the types of macros are very much specific. So if you want to apply macro, basic macro, that's a different category. If you want to apply macros without argument, that's a different category. And if you want to apply macro with arguments, then first of all we need to understand how the argument concept need to be understood. Okay, so suppose if I want to define a macro that has got argument, and that one macro we need to understand with respect to without argument. So first of all I will show you with argument, and let us go to the turbo C++, and then we can understand how we can do the coding, a simple coding with respect to this calculation. Okay, now I will open a new file and let us do coding with respect to that. So we'll clear this content and let us start writing header files. Okay, so you can have inclusion of header file stdio.h, then you have hash include comio.h, that is console input output header file. Now here is the time when you can define a macro. Okay, so hash define is the thing that you need to write there, you need to add there. And suppose I want to have a macro whose name is add. I'm going to define some argument. Okay, so I'm going to write like this, x and y. And then suppose I want to do addition, then I'm going to write like this. Okay, now currently we haven't given any values. Okay, so if you want to create macro with argument, your code is dynamic. And why it is said? Because you can use values as per the macro which returns their sum. So add is the macro that takes two arguments. Which are the two arguments? X and y. These two arguments, and it is going to return their sum. Sum means the addition that we are going to do. So result is getting created of whatever two arguments that are going to take the values. According to that, the calculation is going to get performed. So I will now going for this main function to be declared, and inside that the first concept is to call the macro inside variable. You can do that I'm taking integer data type because here you cannot define the data type. So I'm taking here data type, and I'm using some variable whose name is sum, and then I'm going to call macro inside it with two different values. Okay, we have 4 comma suppose 3. Okay, now don't use semicolon here. Whenever you are defining macro, don't end that part with a semicolon. That is not allowed. So macro you can define it, but don't put semicolon at the end. So here you can use because this is a standard declaration. If I want to print the result, then I will say addition of 4 and 3 is, sorry, percent d, and where that answer is getting stored inside sum, because we have taken this sum variable here. So I just want to print answer inside it, and then I will complete my program. Okay, so please understand this program is with respect to arguments. We have two arguments xy, and we are passing values also with respect to these two arguments, and then definitely this value 4 is getting passed to the x, then this 3 is getting passed to the y, and then xy will be performed, x plus y will be performed, and then it will return the answer 7. So let us just confirm that whether it is going to give you the correct answer or not. Now the addition of 4 and 3 is 7. So this is one thing we need to remember, that by using macro also we can perform some argument related programs. And this is very much interesting that you can define your own macro. Now name cannot be the biggest one, cannot be the smallest one that we are confused with. You can provide any name to the macro. But one thing, the way you are defining arguments, according to that you can show some method. So here the method that is actually used for the calculation is addition, and with respect to two arguments you are passing two values, and then you are calculating and calling that macro inside your variable, and then this result will be displayed. So I hope you have understood this mechanism of putting your macros with argument. So this program is a best example of macro with argument. Okay, so please do perform such type of coding with respect to Turbo C++, and try to practice a lot, because this particular type of programs are not that easy compared to you have switch case or if else or for loop. Those are different programs. Now altogether, if you are studying this pre-processing or pre-processor directives, the commands that as a developer you want to give to the compiler, so definitely you need to be aware about how macros are to be defined, how this directives are to be declared and used. And according to that, your program will give you outputs. So I hope this is one of the program that I want to give you in terms of understanding, and you have understood it properly. So thank you so much for listening me, and keep practicing.